Hey everybody, today we are going to be talking about our favorite guilty pleasures and why. Usually when I do this topic, there's always going to be somebody who's like, I don't feel guilty about my pleasures and you shouldn't, in this big spiel about that. And it's like, when I'm talking about guilty pleasures, it is meant to be, somewhat jokingly. I don't mean you literally feel guilty about your pleasures. It's meant to be kind of a concept, a topic to discuss. I just don't think the concept of it should be taken so seriously. I'm not taking it that seriously when I'm discussing it here. I just think it's kind of interesting to hear what people say about it. But before we get into that, I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commissioned portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below, and if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. And we begin with the first one, and it is Sister Sister. And I'm assuming that you mean like the original show that came on, what was it, on like ABC Family or something like that? I know that I talk about movies on here. I just think that's funny. That is a perfect guilty pleasure. If I ask what a guilty pleasure is, if this is your reaction, good on you. Gosh, I remember watching that show when I was a kid. And yeah, I watched it, I think, every day after school with like a babysitter or something. Tia and Tamara, I think, were the two sisters, the sister-sister duo of the show. And the opening was so 90s. It is just one of those zeitgeisty type of intros. I highly recommend watching it on YouTube if you can find it. The song was catchy, the sister. But then they changed it at a certain point and made it like really kind of cool in like year 2000 style. That is a time capsule. And now it's really hilarious. Next one is Crank 2, High Voltage. That was my first ever time that I really gotten into guilty pleasure stuff. Watching it in the theater back then in 8th grade was certainly an experience that could not be replicated again. Oh man. Okay, so I actually don't think I've seen Crank 2. I've seen the original Crank, and it is again, very zeitgeisty. It certainly couldn't be made today, of course, with all the political correctness. But yeah, I do remember it being, obviously it's like very literally like an adrenaline rush type of situation, and kind of a fun concept for a movie. And it definitely reminds me of like Run Lola Run, just not as interesting, but a similar kind of gimmick that is very kind of straightforward and simple. The editing was very like quick and very extreme, very early 2000s, but it works. I do enjoy that. There is certainly a charm to it, and yeah, obviously it fits with the style of movie, absolutely. I just enjoyed kind of the fast pace of it, and it had a humor to it, and certainly an energy, and it's fun. So I don't know, if the second one is good, you guys let me know if it's worth my time. David Lynch's Dune and Zack Snyder's Watchmen. Both aren't necessarily the greatest adaptations of their source material, but I think both have interesting visual flair and passion behind them where I get into it. Okay, it's actually interesting to lump the two of them together. I never actually thought of that, but actually it kind of makes sense. There are similarities for sure when I look at Watchmen compared to David Lynch's Dune. I feel like I've talked about David Lynch's Dune so many times on here. I feel like I don't need to spend that much time on it. Obviously, it's a film that I really love, despite how messy it is and how, how much of a train wreck it is technically. But it's a lot more unique and interesting, I think, than anything that is in this sterile and, quite frankly, boring new version of Dune that we have. I much prefer this one. It has a lot more of a human element to it. And when I look at Watchmen, yeah, so I have a lot of mixed feelings about that film. Watchmen, the book, obviously, you probably see it on my shelf a lot. That's a book that I really love. I think it's one of the great graphic novels. Not that I'm a graphic novel aficionado, but I certainly do. And trying to take that on as a film is near impossible. I mean, instantly I think, well, miniseries, just like that's the only way you could go about something like this. Obviously they did that, but obviously it wasn't a direct adaptation. And when it comes to the film, I don't like it very much at all. Aesthetically, I think it's really ugly, and there's just a lot of things that are so off the mark. Performances are off, and then there are other things that I really like. I actually like the whole Dr. Manhattan kind of origin story. I think that's really well done. It feels like a really interesting short film. The way it's done in the book is really excellent. That translates very well to screen, actually. And I enjoyed Rorschach. Most of all, I enjoyed the comedian. I thought Jeffrey Dean Morgan gave a fantastic performance there. But yeah, overall, it certainly does not come together. And I feel like the whole idea of Zack Snyder very literally trying to go frame by frame of the original source material, it feels like it's lacking something. Well, I do complain a lot about comic book movies not feeling comic book enough. This one, I feel like it just took that idea too literally. And it's like there is a reason why comic books exist as panels and why movies have a movement to them. I kind of wanted more of a balance there. And for a film that I think really has a seriousness and a depth to it, somebody like Zack Snyder I don't think is mature enough to be able to adapt that sort of thing. I don't think he quite has the level of complexity or kind of the visual quality to be able to support all of that fundamentally. Even when I look at like Night Owl as an example, that's a character that I really like. And yeah, I thought he was completely miscast here. I typically really love Patrick Wilson, but here I just thought it was a really bad performance. And don't even get me started on Silk Spectre. I could do a whole review just on the original Watchmen itself. But yeah, definitely a mixed bag. Spielberg's War of the Worlds. It falls off a cliff in the second half, but the atmosphere and sense of scale and showing the panic and disaster has always been top notch. He was able to capture anxiety at the human level in a far more relatable way than Emmerich has ever done, for example. See, when I think about guilty pleasures, naturally I think of somebody like Roland Emmerich. I think Independence Day, I think 2012, that kind of thing. Because there is a self-awareness and a cheekiness to his work. There's an element of fun, I think, to it, where he's not trying to take himself so seriously. But that said, yes, the Spielberg War of the Worlds, initially, like the first hour or so, I was so pleased by it. And I was thinking like, wow, this is Spielberg really going post 9/11, going much more dark than we're used to seeing from these types of movies he normally makes. No, this is not E.T., this is not Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is something that is very different. And, I watched a little bit of it recently, and the part with the tripods and everything, I think is just so, so good because yes, for the most part, except for maybe one shot, which I wish they had taken out, an aerial shot, they keep it all kind of on the level of the humans. It's all seen from the human's point of view, looking up from Tom Cruise's point of view specifically. And so often movies are more focused on the spectacle, and it was so pleasing to me to see it more on a fundamental emotional level. It did have that feeling of like what it must have been like, as the towers were crashing and like the ash and everything. That cynicism, that darkness absolutely comes through, but in a way that does still feel very Spielberg and very Hollywood for sure. But yeah, unfortunately, I can only go to a certain point and I don't want to watch the rest of the movie because it does, as you say, I mean, it falls off a cliff in the second half of it. And a lot of the motivations, especially for like the son, make absolutely no sense. And then he comes back at the end in a very kind of nonsensical way. The whole ending to me is just a complete dud. It just got really lost and it is really, really frustrating because I think this could have been one of the better Spielberg movies to come out in a very long time. And especially the whole Tim Robbins thing, that I feel like was a real problem in the movie. They should have taken him out or found a new way to kind of create that character or make that character convincing. But yes, I think there are elements for sure that are really good about the movie, especially the rioting and like the breaking of the windows in the car with little Dakota Fanning. All that I think is really, really cool. Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. Oh yeah, that's mine too. So cheesy, but fun as hell from start to finish. I can't lie. Nostalgia is a factor, but I love it. I have to say, I haven't seen this movie in many, many years, but I used to watch it all the time. It was so of its era. There's something about these guilty pleasures. It's like these little zeitgeisty snapshots, and I think that's why we're drawn to them in this way. There's a comfort. It's like old commercials on TV or something that we used to watch. It's very, very satisfying, very comforting. But yeah, I remember this was back in the craze of like the drifting and all of that, and where, a lot of the Asian influence was very much a thing at the time. So it made sense to make a movie about the actual drifting. And yes, really, like none of the main cast is there. And I guess that's maybe why I didn't mind it, because I have to admit, I've never seen the original. I saw Too Fast, Too Furious, which I didn't care for. And then I saw this one and I just really enjoyed this one. It had a lot of the elements I enjoy at the time. I was very obsessed with Japan. So, it all just went hand in hand. The acting is so bad in this movie, but in the best kinds of ways. The villain in this movie and the way he performs it is just hilarious. How he's always like getting up on people, being like that. It's just, fantastic. And the racing too, I remember thinking was really fantastic for the most part. Again, I don't know how it holds up. I have no idea. Same with like stuff like Crank. I'm sure it's very much a product of its era, but there was a momentum to it. It moved really well, and some of those shots were quite well done, I think. And I have to admit, I love the soundtrack to it. To this day, I still listen to it on occasion. House of Gucci is my most recent guilty pleasure. The acting is genuinely terrible outside Adam Driver and Pacino, and the movie just looks incredibly cheap, but it was surprisingly watchable, and I was pretty invested in it from start to finish. Interesting, I wasn't, and I think why is because it was sold as a guilty pleasure type of movie with excess and a very kind of like, the bad acting and Jared Leto's performance, so much being made about that. It made sense that it was going to be like a scene-chewing kind of fun, decadent movie, and it turned out to be, for me at least, I found it to be quite boring. It felt very much like a made-for-TV movie. None of the aesthetic was pronounced. Not very much of it was cheeky and fun and interesting. It just felt, to me, actually boring. And then I read the actual story of it, which I didn't know, and it's so fascinating, and I think, holy crap, this could have been a phenomenal story. Like, I'm so much more invested just reading the Wikipedia page than I am in the actual movie. That is a big problem. And I think the problem is, yes, it was the direction. It's like, I guess they were really going for the performances and really kind of hoping that that would be the thing to create all the camp, but to me, it just wasn't enough. The film just lacked balance. I felt like it didn't know what it wanted to be. Did it want to be serious? Did it want to be more minimalist with a bit of the camp elements, or what? I'm really not sure. So I personally struggle with it. I would love for it to be more like a guilty pleasure type of thing. I'd love for it to be like Showgirls or something like that. But unfortunately, you know, what I got was a bit of a disappointment, but you know, I'm glad you like it. Like I say, we all have our guilty pleasures, and it's totally fine and it's fun, and I enjoy talking about them just as a discussion. But that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Over here you will see my patrons who are wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.